Week 1 of Raiders training camp is officially in the books. So what or who stood out the most? That plus a whole lot more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 29th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show grows each and every day. That's because of the support of you. And, of course, my man Ari does a great job each and every day. Whether I'm home in Studio Q or on the road, he makes sure we're on YouTube. So we definitely shout out Ari. He's on Twitter, at Ari Produces. You can find me on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Whenever you want to be a part of the show, definitely chime in. Again, 707-654-4693. Got a lot coming up on today's show. We will get your calls and texts coming up in segment number 3 as we do on the regular. A lot of feedback based off the first couple days of Raiders practice and in week 1. So what you're hearing, what you're seeing, your thoughts will come up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, as we kick off week 2 of Raiders training camp, going to talk about what I'll be looking for. There's 4 things in particular, at least right now, there's 4 things in particular I'll be looking for this week for Raiders training camp. And again, I'm recording this on Sunday at Studio Q in Las Vegas, about to head back to Costa Mesa for the site of training camp. We'll do that a little bit later on Sunday night. So this is Monday's show, but I'm definitely recording it Sunday from home. And it's kind of nice being at the house. But getting ready to hit the road again for week 2 of Raiders training camp. So I'll tell you everything that I'm looking forward to and looking for from this team coming up in week number 2. And week number 1, we'll do here in segment number 1, we'll just do a little bit of a recap of week number 1, the 3 days of practice, what or who stood out the most. We'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. As well, playoffs are pretty much, not playoffs are over. The sports are really winding down. There's a lot of Olympics action going on right now, which is fantastic. But there's not a whole lot of other sports going on. Baseball is going on. Besides that, it's not a whole lot. But FanDuel is hooking up customers all summer long. All they're doing is giving a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. I'll tell you a lot more about them later on in the show, but just wanted to give a recap of week 1 of Raiders training camp in Costa Mesa. And, it's been fun. It's been an adjustment being out there as opposed to being here locally in Las Vegas and seeing them at their Henderson training camp or their Henderson practice facility. But I think it's been really good, right? I mean, having the ability to really spread out and take over the whole Jack Hammett Sports Complex has been good. And, the first 2 days of practice, that Wednesday and Thursday, felt like it was kind of glorified OTAs. It really felt like, it wasn't slow practice by any mean, but it wasn't really intense. It wasn't really, okay, they're really going to get some good work in until Friday. Friday's when it all changed. Friday is when it officially felt like the first day of real training camp, right? There was a lot of red zone drills. There was a lot of 11 on 11. There was a lot of good on good, right? And you could see there was some intensity there. Not saying like they got in fights or anything. It wasn't like that, but you could just see that there was more intensity. There was more attention to detail. There was a lot of, as a matter of fact, going on, right, on Friday. And I feel like that's really going to, kind of relate to this next week, right? It's going to continue to build this next week, especially on Tuesday when the pads go on. But I'll tell you about this week coming up in segment number 2. But, just kind of going back and looking at the week and trying to reminisce on what the week was of practice, the 3 days, I can tell you no quarterback has separated themselves yet. At all. They both have had moments where they've been good. They both had moments where they've been bad, and then they both had moments where they were just okay, right? And it's funny, following Friday's practice, I was talking to Paul Gutierrez and a couple others on the side while we were watching practice, and the fact that the Raiders defensive line was getting to the quarterback pretty easily, right? Max Crosby was having his way. Christian Wilkins was having his way. Sometimes they would send somebody from another direction and they would get home. It seemed like the defensive line was living in the backfield. It didn't bode well for Aiden O'Connell because Aiden O'Connell is not mobile. So there was a couple times on Friday where he just backpedal, and then just lofted a ball up that looked like, it almost looked like a punt, like a glorified punt. One came down in the arms of Jack Jones. You can't have those throwaways, but you could see where his lack of mobility really hurt him. And Gardner Minshew being able to create with his legs, that also was kind of like obvious on Friday, again, with the way that the defense ramped up their pressure. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's a separator or has separated, because the offensive line doesn't have pads on. So, the defense, it's easier for the defense to really get home in those kind of settings. Now, this week when the pads go on, we'll start to learn a lot about the offensive line and seeing what guys come back from injury as well. But, that did stand out on Friday, the fact that Minshew at least can create with his legs. But then sometimes when he creates with his legs, right, and he doesn't keep it, he decides to throw it. Sometimes it's an errant pass. A pass can get picked off. I mean, it didn't look great, right? It just, like I said, that's why no quarterback has really separated themselves. But you can tell the difference in a quarterback that does have some mobility and a quarterback that doesn't. So I don't know how much that's going to play a factor in this decision on who the quarterback ends up being. And I think a lot of that's going to have to do with the offensive line and how solid they are or how solid they're not. Right? If they're a leaky offensive line, you might need the guy that has the mobility. Right? If they're a solid offensive line, you probably don't. Right? As Jack Jones said, Aiden O'Connell wants to be Tom Brady and stand in the pocket, where Gardner Minshew wants to be Patrick Mahomes-like, where he can use his legs. Again, it might not end up being a deciding factor, but it might, based off what the offensive line ultimately looks like. But with that said, the defense looks really good, right? I mean, the defense looks like what we expect the defense to be. I've been talking all offseason that the defense is going to lead this team. I think that this team is going to surprise a lot of folks and win a lot of games, and it's going to be on the strength of the defense. And they look like they picked up right where they left off at the end of last season. And I know, and Patrick Graham told us earlier in the week, and Antonio Pierce has said it, and the players have said it, you can't take what you did last year, bottle it up, and bring it to this year. But you could tell that they're a unit that's been together now for multiple years. You could tell that Patrick Graham has been the defensive coordinator now for multiple years. And I'm not saying that they're picking up exactly where they left off, but you can see that they're going to be a good unit, right? And we'll learn a lot more about this defense this upcoming week. But the secondary looked really good, right? Jacorian Bennett, a guy who we know is in competition with at least Brandon Faison for that other corner spot across from Jack Jones. He's looked the part. He's looked the part and then some. His confidence right now is sky high. And that's what Jacorian Bennett needs. He can't lose his confidence, and that's what happened his rookie year. He was thrown into the fire. He's got the wheels, and then, some adversity hit, whether it was injury or a couple bad plays, and so he started to lose his confidence. If he can keep that confidence up, he's going to be a hell of a player. Based off of 3 days of what I saw, he's going to be a hell of a player. He's just got to keep his confidence up. So, again, we'll continue to see how he evolves and develops this week, especially when the pads go on. But so far, he looks really good. The safeties look really good. So far, Trayvon Merrick has come up with an interception. Marcus Epps has come up with an interception. Isaiah Palomar has come up with an interception. I mentioned Jack Jones coming up with that interception when Aiden O'Connell floated that ball towards the end zone. The defense, like I said, looks the part, and the addition of Christian Wilkins looks exactly like we expected it to look. Right? And just the way that these guys are getting after it and practicing, you could tell, especially on Friday, like I said, it really felt like, okay, this is training camp. There was one play where, speaking of plays, how about Jacoby Myers? I know I'm kind of scatter shooting all over, but I don't want to make sure I forget to talk about Jacoby Myers. He's looked good. He's looked really good, and in his words, doesn't matter who's throwing on the ball. Right? The ball don't care who throws it, as he said. He just got to go make the play. Jacoby Myers has looked really good, but it made me think of him because of Jack Jones. I've been talking about the secondary and talking about how they look good. Jacoby Myers beat Jack Jones on a play, right? It was a touchdown catch. It was nice, and then Jack Jones knocked the ball out of his hand at the back of the end zone, and Jacoby Myers looked over at him and was like, that was a touchdown, right? And so Jack was hot. He was hot. And he's an emotional dude, right? He rides the emotions. Sometimes his emotions are high, sometimes they're low, but he's an emotional dude. So he was hot. He was angry. Then he had a play where, he was clearly holding and it wasn't good. Coach Manning came over, got after him, not yelling at him or anything, but was like, hey, look, clear your mind. Let's go. We need you. Let's get right. And so then he took on Devontae. And it looked like Devontae was going to have a touchdown catch. And Jack, he was, again, beat, but he did knock the ball out of Devontae's hands before he actually completed the catch. And then he looked at Devontae, gave a little flex. He looked at the crowd and the media, gave a little flex. And the rest of the practice, Jack Jones was the dude. He was the dude. Like, nobody was completing passes on Jack Jones the rest of practice. Again, he rides. That's who he is. He rides those emotional waves, right? He'll make a play. He'll get fired up, and then ride that out. It's funny because Paul Gutierrez, we were standing there watching practice, and he said, with that kind of emotion that Jack Jones has, you might need to have a guy across from him that's not so emotional, a guy that's more of just a kind of a quiet technician, right? And then he started talking about, Paul's been covering the Raiders for a very long time, and by no means is he calling Jack Jones a Hall of Famer or anyone else that's in that Raiders secondary, but he said, when you go back and think about Lester Hayes was the emotional guy. He was the guy that was, fired up, and you always kind of knew what was going on with Lester because he was going to let you know, right? And across from him, he had the technician, Mike Haynes, and then we started talking about, other corners that the Raiders had. C. Wood was the guy that had all the swag, right? He was the guy that was the emotional guy, the guy that fired everybody up. And who was across from him? The great Eric Allen, right? Real quiet, not flashy, but a technician. So he was like, maybe Jack Jones could be that guy, that emotional guy, that guy with the swag, that guy that, is going to pump up the crowd and get them all fired up. And then you've got a quiet guy that's a technician and just really good at what he does across from him. So maybe that is a Brandon Faison, right? Because Brandon Faison is a very quiet dude, but he's got the size and the physicality. But JB's not a guy that's real, loud and talkative either. Young dude, right? He's a fiery dude, but he doesn't really talk a whole lot. So, look for the guy who wins that job to probably be kind of the quiet, calm technician, as opposed to Jack Jones, who is the emotional, right, the guy that gets everyone fired up and has a little bit of swag to him and everything. And really, he's the one who, once he arrived with the Raiders last year, he's the guy who really brought that swag to that Raiders secondary and defense in general. Like, we know what Max brings to the table, and we know he gets everyone fired up, but it was just something different about that Raiders defense and that secondary in particular. Just a confidence about him that was different once Jack Jones arrived. And so he's looking to continue to build on that. But I'll tell you, Friday looked like training camp. And Friday, if that gave us a taste test that we're going to get this week, it's something to get fired up and get excited about. There was a lot of red zone work done in week one, and between O'Connell and Minshew, and Antonio Pierce said it on Friday that he did that intentionally because, look, the red zone has been the Raiders' struggle spot, right? It's been where they've struggled the past, I don't know how many years. So they've got to get some work in the red zone. They've got to make the quarterbacks better in the red zone, and everything is more compact in the red zone. So it's obviously going to be harder to have success, especially against that defense. So that's why he was very intentional about doing the red zone work. But it was a good couple days of practice, but Friday's practice really stood out. Right now, you can see they had that little couple days of ramp up, even though AP said that they're going to hit the ground running. Friday was running. Friday was absolutely running. They might have been walking kind of fast on Wednesday and Thursday. Friday they ran. And that's exciting. You could tell. I'll say this as we wrap up segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. They weren't physical, like they weren't tackling and everything, but it was more physical. It was probably the most physical practice you can have without having pads on, if that makes sense, right? And a guy that I was talking to, Eric Williams, been covering the NFL for a very long time. He said, Q, this reminds me of Pete Carroll's first year in Seattle. He said that he was very physical. They were very intentional with their physicality at practice because he wanted to set the tone. When he first arrived, when they were first putting together the Legion of Boom and that Seattle defense, he wanted it to be known. It has to be physical. It has to be, very as a matter of fact. And so he said, this is what this practice reminds me of. And he said that, Seattle even got fined. They got a couple fines and docked a couple practices because they were, too physical without the pads on. He said, this is what today's practice feels like to me. The first year when Pete Carroll was in Seattle and they had these kind of practices that were as physical as you can get without having pads on. That's what stood out to me probably the most from Friday. Again, Friday was a very good day of work. Again, nobody separated themselves as far as the starting quarterback, but there was a lot of really good work done, which makes me excited for this week number 2. So what am I going to be looking for in week number 2? Well, 4 things in particular. We'll talk about it coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And I love sports. I love all sports, and that's why I turn on the Olympics and just watch them, right? I don't care what it is that's on. I'm just watching them. And it goes from sport to sport to sport to sport. Sports I probably would never even have watched. But since they're Olympics, boom, I'm all the way locked in. Of course, baseball, I'm all locked in with that as well. But for the most part, when it comes to summer, there's not a whole lot of different sports going on. Well, that's where FanDuel comes in. FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I got to do is open up the app, and I can dream up any bet anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. What I want to see this week number 2 of Raiders training camp. And, of course, it'll be the first full week as they only practiced 3 days last week. So what I'll be looking for, I got 4 things in particular, and I know I went a little long in segment number 1, so we'll try to keep it a little tighter here in segment number 2, and then we'll get your calls and texts coming up in segment number 3. But first and foremost, what I'm going to be looking for is JPJ. Jackson Powers Johnson. I want to see him activated off the PUP list. Right, he's a guy that started out camp on the PUP list along with Colton Miller. We know Colton Miller, according to Tom Telesco, is going to be out a couple weeks, and then they're going to reevaluate him. So I'm not looking for Colton Miller this week. But Jackson Powers Johnson, as Tom Telesco told us, should be back in a couple days. Well, how many couple days is a couple days, right? He needs to get as many reps as possible as a rookie with that offensive line. And again, I'm expecting him to be the starting left guard, just like I'm expecting Colton Miller to be the starting left tackle. I'm thinking Andre James, obviously center, Dylan Parham, the right guard, and then Thayer Munford, the right tackle. That unit needs to start getting as much work together as possible. And I know that Colton Miller is not coming back this week. I get that. So it's impossible to get the whole unit together, but you want to get the rookie in there, right? You want to get him lathered up a little bit, get him understanding what NFL football is like, and get him to know his brothers, Andre James, right? Dylan Parham, Thayer Munford. They all have to work together as a unit. So first and foremost, JPJ needs a return. That is the number one thing I'll be looking for, and I'll be the first thing I do each and every day, right? When you get out there to practice, do you see 70? Do you see no, okay, right? See if he's out there. And the day he returns is the day I get to tweet out, Jackson Powers Johnson is out here ready to go, right? Excited about that. I don't know if it's going to be Monday, which, again, this is Monday's show. I don't know if it's going to be today or if it's going to be Tuesday when the pads come on or later in the week. I would love to see JPJ out there before the pads come on. Right, at least give them one day, which would obviously be the Monday practice, to get acclimated to what they're doing, and especially since Friday was really ramped up, to see if they can ramp up a little bit more and get him up to speed before the pads come on. But they come on Tuesday, so there's not a whole lot of time. So hopefully he returns on Monday and Monday's practice. That'll be the first thing I'm looking for. Second thing, I want to see the quarterbacks continue to challenge the wide receivers. As I mentioned in segment number 1, I think JB has had a really good camp so far. Nate Hobbs, I'm interested in Nate Hobbs because he was doing some work with the ones and he was doing some work with the twos. So I want to see if there's a defined role that Nate Hobbs has and why he's doing that with the twos. They might just be having him out there as kind of like that leadership for the second unit. I kind of want to see how they use Nate Hobbs this week, but I really, obviously looking at JB, Jacorian Bennett, Brandon Faison, they're in the competition, but DeCam Richardson, man, I talked about him. Vinny's talked about him. He's got the size, the length. He's got the speed. He's an intriguing dude. I mean, he really is an intriguing dude. I found myself looking at him, and I keep looking down like, wait, who's this? I look at my roster, right? 25, that's DeCam Richardson. I always say, who's 25? Because that used to be Trayvon Merrick's number. So I'm like, wait, who is that again? Oh, that's DeCam. Just his length and his speed is intriguing. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be some shutdown corner. I'm not. But where does he fall in line? Can he start to really develop? He has the confidence, that's for sure. He's got plenty of confidence, got plenty of size, got plenty of speed. Can he develop into the guy that they need him to be? And again, they don't need him to be that guy right now, right? But at some point, you want to hope that, the later round picks that you have, some of those start to really pan out. And obviously, Jacorian Bennett is a 4th round pick from a year ago. If all of a sudden they can get a guy like DeCam where they start believing in him early and he even gets some burn, that would be great. Right, but so that whole secondary, I just want to continue to see them really work. When you're working against guys like Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, I didn't even talk about Brock Bowers in segment number 1 about what I saw from last week, but he's a guy that they're very intentionally getting the ball to. Right, they're definitely making sure Brock Bowers, the 1st round pick out of Georgia, gets the ball early and often. But those kind of weapons, when you're looking at Devontae, you're looking at Jacoby, you're looking at Brock Bowers, hell, you got the big fella, Michael Mayer, right? When you got those kind of weapons out there, Trey Tucker with his speed, you want to see that secondary kind of match that intensity and be able to go, step for step. It's hard to stop Devontae. Right, Devontae is Devontae. I mean, even just watching him up close and personal practice, it's just unbelievable how he just gets open. He gets open and gets his hands on the ball. And once he gets his hands on the ball, 9 times out of 10, he's going to make sure he hauls that one in. And Jacoby Myers is nothing to shake a stick at. Jacoby Myers is a dude, right? So that's a tough out for the secondary, but they're doing the very best that they can, and I think they're doing a really good job. So I want to see that continue to grow in week 2. And then, of course, the pads go on Tuesday. That's when guys like Zamir White, Alexander Madison, the offensive line, Dylan Lobby, right, the 6th-round pick out of New Hampshire. The running backs can really start to get, put into the mix. Right now, as Zamir White told us last week, it's like, almost like 7-on-7 going on out there, right? It's like a passing drill, right? Because you really can't figure out what you have in the running backs until they're actually able to put the pads on and be physical. Even when they do the running and there are no pads on, you know that they're not trying to tackle to the ground. There is no physicality, really. They're just, tagging guys. So you can't really see what the running backs are and what you have in them until they get the pads on. So on Tuesday, I'm looking forward to seeing Zeus, right? This dude's been in the gym or in the barn, as he says, right? He's been doing all the work on the farm all offseason, really get his body ready for this upcoming season, knowing that he's going to be the workhorse, right? He's going to carry the load. Obviously, Alexander Madison is going to be there as well to complement him. But, I mean, this is Zamir White's opportunity, his time to shine, right? So he's looking forward to that, but you really can't tell until the pads come on. So starting on Tuesday, I'll definitely be looking at from the running backs and obviously, like I mentioned before, the offensive line, because the defensive line have been having their way with the offensive line so far, but it's easy for them just to pin their ears back and get to the quarterback, right? The offensive line, there's not a whole lot that they could do right now without pads on. So when those pads come on, boom, then that's when it's go time, right? And then you can start to see, and then I can say, okay, the offensive line is going to be leaky. There's going to be some struggles. Or Thayer Munford is getting destroyed by Max Crosby, and he doesn't stand a chance, right? Like, I can give you a more accurate description of what's going on once the pads are on, and I can tell you what the offensive line looks like. So that's something I'm looking forward to. And finally, what everybody's looking forward to, one of the quarterbacks to separate themselves. This week being a full week of practice, especially with everything getting ramped up, if you can get 5 days of what they did on Friday, if you can get 5 days of work again like that all week long, you could really learn a lot about this team, right? So I'm assuming that one of the quarterbacks is going to start, separating themselves and just looking more comfortable in Luke Getsy's offense, looking more comfortable running it, having more success in 11-on-11 team drills, right? And again, as I mentioned for Friday, the mobility of Gardner Minshew really stood out. Is it going to have to stand out, right? I'll learn a lot about that this week once the pad's on. Is it going to have to, be a factor, right? Is the offensive line going to be suspect and someone going to have to run around? If the quarterback's going to need to run around a lot, Aiden O'Connell is not going to be that guy. He's just not. I mean, he doesn't look comfortable even when he rolls out. There's a few drills that they do where you roll out and then throw it. Didn't really look comfortable doing that either. So, I mean, they are really going to have to protect him if he's going to be the guy. I've said it from the jump. I think he's going to be the guy, but the offensive line is going to have to really put in that work to make sure that they can protect him, to give him an opportunity to throw the ball. But, yeah, finally definitely want to see one of these quarterbacks start to separate themselves. Obviously, we'll learn a lot more about them when they're in game action, when they're playing Minnesota, their first preseason game, or the Cowboys or the Niners. Those are the 3 games that they have. But I should be able to start to see something from training camp. And again, last week was only 3 days, so this one being at least a full week worth of work, I think that we should, by the end of the week, see something and say, okay, look, that guy is starting to be the leader in the clubhouse for that starting quarterback role. So those are the 4 things. JPJ, Jackson Powers-Johnson, return to practice. Cornerbacks continue to challenge the wide receivers, and that secondary continue to gel like they've been doing because they look really good. With the pads going on Tuesday, running backs in the offensive line, how do they look? And then a quarterback separate themselves, whether that's O'Connell, Minshew, O'Connell, whatever, one of those quarterbacks start to separate themselves. And I feel like if the Raiders keep 3 quarterbacks, I feel like Anthony Brown's definitely going to be that guy, right? I mean, and he might even be a guy that they even have a package for because of his athletic ability. I'm not hearing that. I'm just saying it, right? Just because it looks like that there's got to be a role for Anthony Brown on this team, but especially with the new quarterback rule and the emergency quarterback, I could see him, being a guy that takes a significant snap or 2 throughout the course of this year. So that's what I'm looking for this week, and we'll start to check those boxes off as this week rolls on. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts are next at 707-654-4693. It's the Locked On Raider Podcast voicemail line. Your calls are next. We'll close out the show for this Monday, July 29th, 2024. We'll do that after I tell you about Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. And it's funny, Adam Hill and Paul Gutierrez actually went to the Angels-A's game there obviously in Southern California while we were at Costa Mesa for training camp. And they were telling me about it the next day, and they were saying how they got into the game for like $6. $6 is how they got into the game, and that was their second choice of seats. They actually had some other seats that they could have got in for like $8 that might have been a little bit better, but they ended up going with the $6 seats. How did they do that? They did that with Gametime. Again, you can get cheap tickets the closer you get to first pitch. That's for baseball, but you can go to concerts, comedy, theater, any kind of sporting events. Gametime has got you covered, especially with those last-minute deals. They've got zone deals, all-in prices, seats view, so you can see exactly where you're sitting before you actually press yes that you're going to buy the tickets. You can get a panoramic view from your seat, so that's pretty cool as well. And, of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets or any tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. We're off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Army Raider. He's calling to give his thoughts on what he's hearing and seeing from training camp after 1 week. Here he is, Army Raider.
What's up, you? It's your boy, Army Raider. Just sitting here catching up on all the videos and news and everything from training camp, and I think I got a little different take than most people. Seems like the Raiders are doing a lot of talking this year, just media about how pissed off they are. The Mahomes Kermit the Frog thing. Like, if you look at the teams that actually win, they're the teams that shut up and just do their talking on the field. Even the old Raiders teams, yeah, you'd have one or two people talk, but the reason the Raiders were feared is because they went out and whooped you up on the field. If you look in all sports, NFL, NBA, college football, whatever, the teams that win and succeed are the teams that just keep their mouth shut and go whoop you on the field. The teams that struggle are the teams that do all the talking. I mean, I understand we're trying to do this mentality. We're trying to get that fire or whatever. But me personally, I'd love to see us just go out there and do it on the field. Stop talking until you do something. We ain't won nothing. We're being slept on. Use that as motivation. You don't have to go talk about it every single day. Be like, all right, we got that. But if you look at the Patriots when they were in their dynasty, the Chiefs, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan last year, all teams just shut up and whoop you on the field. The Celtics, shut up, whoop you on the court. So I don't know how other people feel. I just really love to see us stop talking until we start whooping people on the field. Anyway, that's just my rant. Army Raider out.
Army Raider, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. And I understand where you're coming from totally. Just keep your mouth shut and go to work. Like, I totally get that. But I think that as long as they use that energy correctly, I think it's okay. And AP has basically said the same thing. Like, yeah, they're pissed off, but as long as they channel it correctly, it should be okay. Matter of fact, we'll go back to Friday real quick. AP spoke to the media before practice. So here's a couple little sound bites from Antonio Pierce, what he had to say. It was basically on the chatter and them being very vocal. Paul Gutierrez asked the first question about the team feeling disrespected, and Jack Jones and Robert Spillane saying that they're pissed off and they didn't like that. And then there's a follow-up from Tashawn Reed that actually asks about the Kermit doll and that situation that happened at training camp. So here's the first sound bite from Antonio Pierce on that.
Yesterday, Jack and Robert both spoke a little bit about like this lack of respect, the disrespect that the team is getting, that you're getting, and they're using it as fuel to the fire. As a former player, how fine is that line between using it as fuel and also kind of, you got to not listen to the noise?
Well, I think it's hard in today's world because everything they have access to everything. They're going to find out one way or the other through social media, somebody texting you, telling you. As you know, our team is very outspoken, and when they feel something, they talk about it. But I think they both said the right thing, that we got to go out there and change the narrative, and that's what our plan is.
Yesterday, kind of on the same note, like after practice, there was a video going viral with the Kermit doll or whatever. Do you like leaning into that kind of stuff, talking trash, or do you kind of tell the guys to stay away from it?
No, we addressed it as a team yesterday. We nipped it in the bud. It's over with.
So you could tell that the Kermit doll, the Patrick Mahomes doll thing was not good. clearly they addressed it as a team. Even Gardner Minshew after practice on Friday mentioned, yeah, we were told about that multiple times. We're not going to fall for that one again. So, the fan was having fun, and unfortunately, Trey Taylor, the rookie, he just went with it, had some fun, really didn't kind of really know. And it ended up going viral, the whole video and everything. And so that obviously wasn't a good look, but okay, it's over and done with. Of course, Patrick Mahomes has already been asked about it. He said he'll handle it at some other time, whatever. It is what it is. But clearly Antonio Pierce wasn't happy about it. He handled it internally. It's done. Right? You heard him. That was like a 3-second answer right there. But as far as just them, the chirping and everything and them feeling disrespected, he's cool with it. You heard him say, channel it the right way. And then Myra Gomez, who I don't think she was there at the beginning of the presser, she came over and also referenced Jack Jones and Robert Spillane, talking about the disrespect of the projected 6-11 overall record. Here's what Antonio Pierce had to say again.
Coach, I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but Jack and Robert both spoke up yesterday about the predictions that are going around as far as what the record will be for the Raiders. Knowing how fired up they are to prove that that's not who they are, how does that make you feel?
Well, I love it. The best part about it, we're still 0-0. We haven't played any games yet, and we control the games that we win and lose. And I think the one thing about this team, and you'll see, and it's going to carry out, and you see it in their personalities, they got a chip on their shoulder. They play with a little bit of, they're pissed off. And that's good. And as long as we control that energy into something positive on game day, we'll be fine.
So there you go. I mean, just a couple examples of AP saying, he's fine with them being talkative. He's fine with them, saying what's on their mind. They just got to use it correctly, right? And so I think there's a fine line. Even you heard Paul ask the question, what is that fine line? They've got to figure that out, right? And if it gets a little bit too much talking and not enough work, all talk, no go, I'm sure Antonio Pierce will handle this. So I think it's okay, but I definitely understand your concern. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. Up next, got a text from John G in Seattle. It's a pretty lengthy one. He says, hey, Q, it's John G in Seattle. Had some time to catch up with Thursday and Friday's episode. I wanted to chime in on the Raiders having training camp at Costa Mesa. And all I got to say is I can't help but laugh at folks that swear the Raiders and Raider Nation don't dominate the landscape in L.A. I get to spend time down there a few times throughout the year, every year. And I see way more Raider hats, jerseys, jackets, license plate frames, car decals, all that. I be seeing more Raider gear from sales in Costco's and other local stores than I see Rams and Chargers gear. No bias, I'm calling it how I see it. I heard some ESPN LA radio talking about the Raiders being there, and it's funny because if it was true that the Raiders and Raider Nation didn't have that kind of influence alive and well in LA, they wouldn't be talking and giving the Raiders this much attention. Now, when it comes to the NFL, I understand territorial rules, but we all know if this was the Texans or Cardinals coming to and practicing in Costa Mesa, there wouldn't be this much effort to keep things hush-hush. Just saying, I know Kroenke and those millionaires know the truth when it comes to who runs deeper in Southern California, and it's the Raiders. So, like last line in the autumn win and laugh when he's conquered and won, LA is ours. Thank you, Q. Hope you have a great time at camp and hope you have a great weekend. That's John G in Seattle. And yeah, I mean, you're spot on with all that. And you're right. If it was the Texans who have been in Southern California, the Saints are practicing in Southern California, it wouldn't be a big deal. It wouldn't be a big deal at all, right? I mean, the Cowboys obviously are in Oxnard, but they are grandfathered in. They have a lot of fans there. But any other team, they wouldn't. The Rams and Chargers wouldn't care at all. But because it is the Raiders and they do have that dominant, thumbprint and dominant really holds on LA in general, of course they're going to be upset, and that's why they're going to exercise their rights. Any other team, nah, they wouldn't have cared at all. If the Packers came to town and practice, they wouldn't care. Not at all. So there's that. You're absolutely spot on about that. Thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Big E in the 209. He's calling to talk about the excitement around the team in training camp and has a question about AP's contract as it pertains to me talking about an extension and how that would be a huge goal. Here he is, Big E in the 209.
What up, Q? This is Big E from the 209, man. Was just calling to, number one, comment on all the excitement going around training camp, putting it as you saying it's like the first day of school is actually the perfect representation. Everybody's morale is high. Raider Nation is excited to get the season started, and honestly, it's nice that there's excitement around the team because in past years, there wasn't that much buzz or so around the team as it is now. And even with them being ranked low by all the like ESPN and everybody else like that, I think there's still a lot of buzz and things to be happy about or excited about with this team. One thing, it's funny, and I know a bunch of people said it already, but we consistently finish better than the Chargers. 4 out of the past 5 years, I think we've been second in the AFC or finished better than the Chargers. but they're still ranking us below them, which is funny. But real quick question. This has to do with a couple shows ago. You talked about giving Antonio Pierce a contract extension. My quick question was, did you ever figure out the particulars of his contract now? Like how many years is it? How much is it? Not to be in his pockets or anything, just the length of his contract, just so we can have some kind of idea of what Mark Davis thinks of him. Did they release any details of his contract? Anyways, Q, appreciate all you do for Raider Nation, keeping us up to date, man. Have a good one. Hope to hear back from you soon. Thanks.
Big E, thanks for the call. I appreciate you, my man. And I want to say that AP's contract is a 3-year deal, but I don't know. And I couldn't, as I was trying to look it up, I couldn't find it either. So I want to say that someone told me it was a 3-year deal. I will check. I'll find that out. I'll try to get that confirmed so we, can talk about it. But, for anyone who doesn't know what he was referencing, I was saying how my guy Gerard Cherry, who does radio in Cleveland, I was doing the state of the team, and I was talking about the Cleveland Browns, and I said, what's the biggest improvement? And he said that both the GM, Andrew Berry, and their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, got extensions in the offseason. When's the last time a Browns head coach got an extension? When was the last time a Browns GM got an extension? And it got me to thinking, like, damn, when's the last time a Raiders head coach got an extension? When's the last time a Raiders GM got an extension, right? And obviously the last extension for a Raiders head coach was Jack Del Rio. He got an extension, they got fired the next year, right? And then Reggie McKenzie had the success that one year in 2014 where he had a really good draft class, looked like he was going to be around for a long time, and then he wasn't, right? And so, I mean, they haven't had guys. So that would be a good sign of success if some 2-3 years down the line, all of a sudden AP's getting a contract extension and Tom Telesco's getting a contract extension. That lets you know that the team is trending in the right direction. But it took for someone to say that out loud for me to even think about that. That wasn't on my radar, but it was a great point. I was glad Gerard brought that up. So Big E, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. I just got time for a couple more. This text is from Josh in the 619. Says, yo, Q, Josh from the 619, I just don't agree with the whole Minshew having a benefit with his mobility, because if you look at how Getsy ran an offense with Justin Fields, a mobile quarterback, it didn't work out too much. But if he's implementing a system closer to his time in Green Bay, like Devontae said, Aiden is probably the better fit because he's a pocket passer like Rodgers. Just food for thought, but I feel like this system specifically, Aiden is probably the better fit. That's Josh in the 619. Thanks so much. I do appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about a mobile quarterback to run and go pick up 1,000 yards. I'm not asking him to be a weapon like that. I'm saying if the offensive line isn't very good, he's probably going to have some mobility like I saw on Friday. It was a glaring difference between Aiden and Gardner Minshew. It doesn't matter what system you run. If you can't be protected and you don't have any time to throw, you're going to be on your backside and it's not going to matter. Now, this is a system like they ran in Green Bay, but even Aaron Rodgers has the ability to use his legs and get out of there. And we've seen that, right? We've seen Aaron Rodgers run for touchdowns. We've seen Aaron Rodgers move the pocket. We've seen him, scramble multiple times. Like he does do that. Aiden O'Connell struggles to do that. I mean, that's the thing. When I'm watching it with my eyes, he struggles to move. I mean, he's a guy that is going to be in the pocket all the time. And that's fine to be in the pocket. That's great. Tom Brady made a career out of being in the pocket. But he's got to get that ball out of his hand quickly, and he's got to be able to be very decisive. And that was part of Aiden's struggles in his rookie year, was holding on to the ball too long. So, again, as I said I think Aiden O'Connell's going to win the job, but a lot of the offensive line is going to make the determination, I think, of who's going to win the job. Again, I think Aiden's going to get it, but if that offensive line is leaky and all of a sudden they've got to run around a lot, then Minshew might be the guy that they have to start off with, especially if Colton Miller doesn't return right away and JPJ doesn't return right away. There's some scenarios where I can see Gardner Minshew definitely being that guy. But I understand what you're saying. I'm not talking about using your legs like Justin Fields. I'm talking about using your legs to stay out of trouble. All right, so there is a difference. Josh, thanks for the text, so I do appreciate you. I got a call from Raider Jay in SoCal. He's calling to talk about how the players and coaches' press conferences have gotten him fired up, and he talks about his expectations for the season as well. Here he is, Raider Jay in SoCal.
What up, Q? It's Raider Jay out of SoCal, by way of 510. I was just calling because I was listening to your Friday show. Man, I'm not going to lie. Press conferences, just hearing the guys talk about how fired up they are, got me fired up, man. Even hearing PG talk about the approach to the season and where the guys' heads are at. I'm going to keep it short, man. I think we go 6-3 into the bye, and I think we finish 11-6. So we flip the script on the whole 6-11 thing. Like Jack Jones said, seeing our team lose 11 times just don't make no sense. At this point, I think the defense carries us, and I think the one reason that it does is because this is the first time I can remember in pretty much last 20 years, from what I can recall, that the Raiders have actually had a voice at every single level of the defense. You got Max Crosby on the D-line, obviously the voice that he is and the presence that he is in the locker room. Robert Spillane at linebacker, who's picked that up with the green dot, and Jack Jones at the corner position. We've always had one guy at a certain level of the defense that was a voice, Seawood for when he made his stint coming back, and we had Khalil Mack, but, Mack was never really a vocal leader. And then we've always really missed it at the linebacker level for as long as I can remember. So, yeah, man, I think we get carried by the defense this year, and PG does more wizardry in his third year with this system and these guys, and guys like Jacorian Bennett and Tyree Wilson take the lead. So that's my prediction, man. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel, Raider Nation. Appreciate you, Q, as always. Great work, and go Raiders.
Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, they do have a way of getting you fired up, right? Because they know what the job at hand is. They also know what's been going on and being said about them. So I love the fact that they're not afraid to embrace it and go out there and say that the time is now. Like, they've got to stop settling for mediocrity, right? And I've said this multiple times. What I'm hearing and seeing from these players is what I heard and saw from AP before the Raiders went to Kansas City and won on Christmas, right? Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Tired of being, the butt of jokes. Tired of being the ones that are just ran over and not considered anything in the league because, well, it's been so many years of struggles. Enough is enough. That's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm hearing. That's what gets me excited and fired up as well. Thanks so much for the call. We'll close out with a text from Apartment Raider 951. That's out of Riverside. It says, "Hey, Q, it's Apartment Raider from the 951, Riverside, California. I'd like to wish my wife, Celia, I think it's Celia, happy birthday. We call each other during our breaks to talk about the podcast. She and her family got me into football and taught me the Raider way. Love the show, Q, and let's wish her a happy birthday, Raider Nation." Raiders. It's Apartment Raider at 951 Riverside. Celia. I think it's Celia. I hope I got that right. It's a happy birthday to her, so I want to make sure I got it right. If not, I apologize, but happy birthday. I think that's a great way to close out the show. Thanks so much for listening to the show on the daily and calling each other and talking about it. I think that's awesome, so I do appreciate that. And like I said, hopefully you have a really good birthday. Whether it was Friday, I'm not too sure if it was Friday or if it was today, but happy birthday regardless. And that's going to do it for today's show. Again, I'm in Studio Q, about to make my way back to Costa Mesa right now and get ready for week 2 of Raiders training camp and have a lot to look forward to, and hopefully this team continues to grow. But thanks so much for making the Locked On Raiders podcast your first listen every day. You want to get caught up with every other team in the league or just inquire about some other teams, the Locked On Podcast Network's got it covered. All 32 teams are covered. They got over 200 shows, so all kind of different sports are covered. They've got everything on lock. So check out the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, it's your team every day. And so until tomorrow, Raider Nation, we'll actually be talking about another day of practice, what happened on Monday. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.